In 2007, BlackBerry controlled almost half of the entire smartphone market in America. Presidents carried one. CEOs carried one. Millions of people couldn't imagine leaving the house without one. 15 years later, BlackBerry stopped making phones altogether. Not because people stopped wanting smartphones. People bought more smartphones than ever before. BlackBerry disappeared because it kept building the same winning device in a world that had already moved on. This is the story of how the company that put email in your pocket before the iPhone even existed got completely left behind by the revolution it helped start. Before we get into it, if you're into business documentaries that dig into the decisions behind the biggest rises and falls in history, subscribe to Mayer's Archives. We post a new one every week. Now let's go back to the beginning. Before the iPhone, before Android, before people carried powerful computers in their pockets, there was a small Canadian technology company trying to solve one very specific problem: communication. In the 1980s, two engineering students named Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Fredgen were fascinated by electronics. Lazaridis was obsessed with technology. Fredgen was creative, energetic, and loved building things. Together, they founded a company called Research in Motion, RIM. At first, RIM wasn't trying to build the world's most popular phone. It was experimenting with wireless communication. The idea was simple. What if information could move through the air without needing a traditional phone line? At the time, that sounded almost futuristic. But Lazaridis believed wireless networks were going to transform communication. And he was right. Throughout the 1990s, RIM developed devices that could send and receive information wirelessly. Then, in 1999, everything changed. RIM introduced the BlackBerry. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't trying to replace every device you owned. It didn't look like the future. But it did one thing incredibly well: email. You could receive messages instantly, reply from almost anywhere, and carry your work in your pocket. For business professionals, that was revolutionary. Executives no longer had to wait until they got back to the office to check their inbox. Messages followed them everywhere. The device spread fast. Lawyers carried them. Bankers carried them. Journalists carried them. Government officials carried them. And then something unexpected happened. People got addicted. The physical keyboard made typing fast. The blinking notification light constantly told you there was another message waiting. The little clicking sound of the keys became part of everyday office life. It even earned a nickname: the Crackberry. BlackBerry had built something people didn't just use. They couldn't stop using it. It became a status symbol. If you had one, you looked important. You looked connected. You looked like you were working. By the mid-2000s, BlackBerry was one of the most powerful smartphone companies on Earth. Its subscriber base exploded. Its stock soared. Governments and corporations trusted its security more than anything else on the market. BlackBerry had built an enormous advantage. And then, in January 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco to introduce a product that would change everything: the iPhone. At first, BlackBerry executives weren't particularly worried. Why would they be? The iPhone didn't even have a physical keyboard. It relied on a touchscreen. Battery life wasn't great. It was expensive. And BlackBerry's customers were business professionals. They needed keyboards. They needed security. They needed email. Not fancy entertainment features. At least, that's what BlackBerry believed. But Apple wasn't just building another phone. It was changing what people expected a phone to be. The screen became the center of the experience. Web browsing got easier. Music got integrated. Apps became a massive part of the device. Touchscreens became normal. BlackBerry had spent years perfecting the smartphone as a communication tool. Apple was turning it into a pocket computer. Then Google entered with Android. Suddenly, BlackBerry wasn't fighting one competitor. It was fighting an entire ecosystem. Samsung, HTC, Motorola, Apple, Google. The market was moving at incredible speed. BlackBerry's biggest advantage, its keyboard, was becoming its biggest limitation. The company tried to respond. New touchscreen devices, a redesigned operating system, new phones. But something was missing. BlackBerry was reacting instead of leading. For years, BlackBerry had been asking, how can we make email better? Apple was asking a completely different question: what can a computer in your pocket do? That difference became everything. Consumers were discovering they wanted apps, games, maps, photography, music, video, social media. an entire digital world in their pocket. And BlackBerry's software ecosystem couldn't keep up. Developers were building for iPhone and Android. Consumers were buying iPhones and Android phones, which attracted more developers, which created more apps, which attracted even more consumers. A cycle had begun, and BlackBerry was standing outside of it. In 2010, BlackBerry still had tens of millions of subscribers. The company wasn't dead, not even close. But the direction was becoming impossible to ignore. The smartphone market was moving away from BlackBerry. Then came another blow. BlackBerry's internal systems couldn't always handle the explosive growth of its own network. Service outages started making headlines. Users couldn't access email. Messages stopped working. For a company whose entire reputation was built on reliable communication, this was disastrous. Customers started asking a dangerous question. Why should we stay with BlackBerry? By 2011, the decline was accelerating. Market share was collapsing. The stock price was falling. And the company was struggling to convince anyone its future still mattered. Then came the final blow. BlackBerry released the BlackBerry 10 platform, a new operating system and new devices built to finally compete with modern smartphones. But by then, Apple and Android had already built massive ecosystems. Consumers had moved on. Developers had moved on. The world had moved on. In 2013, the company attempted a major transformation, announcing it would be acquired in a deal valued at roughly $4.7 billion. That deal eventually collapsed. Instead, the company took a major investment and continued operating independently. But the BlackBerry that once dominated offices and airports everywhere was disappearing. The company eventually stopped designing its own smartphones altogether. In 2022, BlackBerry's legacy devices lost access to the company's legacy services for good. The era was officially over. Think about how extraordinary that is. BlackBerry didn't disappear because smartphones became unpopular. Smartphones became more popular than ever. BlackBerry disappeared because the smartphone itself evolved, and BlackBerry didn't evolve fast enough with it. The company had incredible engineers, loyal customers, strong security, a powerful brand, and one of the biggest advantages any technology company could ask for, a head start. But the market didn't reward the company that invented yesterday's winning formula. It rewarded the companies that understood tomorrow's. That's the lesson of BlackBerry. Your greatest strength can become your greatest weakness the moment the world changes around you. BlackBerry built the perfect device for an era when communication was the most important thing a phone could do. But then the phone stopped being just a communication device. It became a computer, a camera, a game console, a television, a navigation system, a music player, a social network, an entire ecosystem. BlackBerry saw the smartphone coming. What it failed to see was what the smartphone would become. And that's why one of the very companies that helped create the smartphone revolution was eventually pushed out of it. This has been Mayer's Archives. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe. We release a new business documentary every week, breaking down the decisions that built empires and the ones that quietly destroyed them. Because every world-changing story has a beginning.